All right. A very good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this webinar on SRES, empowering teachers to collect, analyze, and act on meaningful data to engage students at scale. I'm Alan Sung, the facilitator for this webinar, and currently serving as part of the ASCILITE executive and organizing this series of ASCILITE webinars this year. Firstly, I'd like to introduce you to the presenters for this afternoon's webinar. We have three speakers from the University of Sydney. Firstly, we have Dr. Danny Liu, who is a molecular biologist by training, programmer by night, and researcher and academic developer by day and educator at heart. A National Teaching Award winner, he focuses on wrangling technology to improve learning and teaching by work at the confluence of educational technology, student engagement, learning analytics, and professional development and leadership. We also have Kevin Samnick, who is an educational designer, background in secondary STEM teaching, pharmaceutical research, and biology. He's an advocate for education, learning technology, and ensuring students and teachers at our first priority in higher education. And we also have Ruth Weeks, who is an educational design manager with a background in teaching English as a foreign language and academic writing. She's also passionate about teaching with technology and the future of digital education. Now, for this afternoon's 1-hour webinar, the presenters will share for a segment, and then the remaining time will be for hands-on as well as question and answer. So without further ado, please help me to welcome Danny, Kevin, and Ruth. Over to you.
Great, thanks, Alan. I'm just going to flick over to our screen share so we can share our PowerPoint. So like Alan was saying, we will do maybe 15 minutes of talking. Feel free to ask any questions you want during in the chat. That's a bit scary. And then we'll do a bit of actually hands-on on the system so you can have a go at it and then ask any questions you want. And then we'll wrap up with about 5 minutes of chat at the end as well. Do let us know if you can't hear us. We have as you can probably see from our cables in front of us, we have quite a messy audio-visual setup here. So do let us know in the chat if things aren't coming through. Sunny Dunedin, New Zealand, fantastic. Okay, so we wanted to kind of share with you guys today a little bit of what we've been doing at Sydney about getting teachers onto using data to actually support students. And before we get started, we wanted to kind of think about some issues around learning analytics. We're all fairly familiar with the field, hopefully, and some kind of things that people have said about it. And so I quite like this quote. This quote is from a blog post just last year, and it's the idea that when people come to learning analytics, they think that if you just have enough data, if N is big enough and you squint really hard, then you may be able to start to see a solution to some of our problems. Yes and no. We also have this table from a paper a few years back, kind of comparing the two research fields around learning analytics and also educational data mining. And this was obviously written by the two, I guess, fathers of learning analytics and also educational data mining. And one of them last year put out a paper talking about this idea of human intelligence, which is really quite interesting. And the idea is, it's not so much about the technology and the computers, it's more about the humans that the technology empowers. And so it's about giving instructors and designers and humans some support. And we just want to kind of highlight this thing from that paper back then as well, which is talking about how learning analytics is kind of about leveraging humans. It's about making humans stronger, faster, better, and more informed, essentially. And so those papers were kind of talking about how analytics should be about empowering the teachers. And so we kind of want to focus on the teachers in this presentation today, because we want to talk about how they engage with their students, how they engage with data. And so when we think about it, a few other provocations come to mind. This one is quite neat. This particular article talks about learning management systems, but it's the idea of needing to really understand what academics sitting in all corners of the university or institution actually need, and how their everyday learning and teaching happens. I like this quote as well. This idea of, or this is actually from the the head of analytics at Blackboard. And so he writes in his blog post a couple of years back that dashboards that promise the moon but are meaningless in the light of concrete questions, that really gets academics offside, and it quickly makes them to, I guess, lose interest in analytics. And this final one, from a fairly famous paper just a few years back as well, thinking about why learning analytics didn't take off at a couple of institutions. And the idea was behind, people saw it as a time-consuming imposition. There was a lack of support from faculty and all these kind of things, which actually stopped it from actually making a difference in the university. And so we wanted to kind of turn all this talk of analytics on its head and say, instead of saying empowering teachers with learning analytics, let's think about it as kind of, what do teachers actually need, and what do they need to do? So a lot of people ask the question when they come to learning analytics, they say, what is the question people have? I think that's the wrong question. I think the right question is, what do people actually need? What do academics who are implementing these systems actually need? And I think they need things where they can better connect to their students, and also things that save them time as well, because we all know that academics work 200%, or everyone at universities and institutions work 200%, and so anything that makes our lives easier and quicker is good. And so we wanted to kind of share with you today our Sydney Uni approach to it. And what we've seen in our approach is that people have, these are comments from staff members who have been using our approach, our system, and they're saying to us, it's really using this thing called the SRES, which we'll show you and you'll have to play with today, really helps to engage a range of different students fairly easily and effectively. It's led to various things like reductions in absent fails, student engagement increasing, students feeling like they're valued and all those kind of things. And also students getting back to the academics and saying, this personalized attention that you're finally able to give us, even though we're in such a large class, is fantastic. The next two quotes in orange are actually from students. So this one is quite a nice one, saying, I really appreciate how you keep in contact with us. I don't know how you do it. Well, the secret is they use the system, or this academic uses the system to keep in contact and in touch with his students. And this one, next one, is a little sad, but it's quite pressing, because it's saying how a student can go through 3, 4, 5 years of university and never actually receive any kind of personalized support from their teachers. And this is it's encouraging because the system has allowed this to happen, but it's also depressing at the same time, because how can this happen for our students at university? So how can we actually make a difference for our students when we're all so busy? Using this system, apart from those kind of qualitative comments, we've also seen various things like this. I'm not sure if we're meant to be sharing that figure, but it's on the recording now, so it's out there. What we've seen in this, in using this, is people have noticed various things like performance improving, the merit grade distribution shifting upwards. This is just a couple of examples from 2 subjects. The SRES was introduced there. The reason why we're only showing these years is because those are the years where the subjects are most comparable, where other changes didn't really happen. And so what we're seeing here is, for example, a reduction in attrition, and also a shift in merit grades higher as well, and also reduced failures. And so the idea is, if you are able to empower your teachers and give them the ability to work with information about their students at a large scale, and make this fairly easy for them, so it kind of reduces their workload, reduces the impact on their time, this can actually be quite an effective approach. And so when we're thinking about it, we think about we think about what teachers actually do with their students, and what students do with their teachers and with the course over the course of a semester or over the course of a week. And we think about how teachers actually know if their students are engaged or not, because teachers want to work on this engagement data. They don't necessarily want to work on demographics or work on things like ATAR or anything. They want to know, how are my students going in week 4? How are my students going in week 8, based on some data I know about them or I have about them? And so the question that we always ask people is, well, these are the things that happen with the students during the semester. How do you know, well, what kind of data points can you grab from this general kind of picture of a semester to actually see if your students are engaging or not? And so there are people come back with things like, obviously there are marks and achievement of outcomes, whether or not they submit and how late they submit, marks and other attempts and online and also face-to-face quizzes. You can think about things like online accesses, online activity, and also things which are typically very difficult to capture, like in-class grades or in-class feedback. So things like attendance, are they turning up, are they participating, how are they participating, how are they interacting with their peers. And so the idea behind the system was essentially, this is the data that academics think are important to judge whether or not their students are engaged and also performing. How can we actually get this data into a place that teachers can very readily use it to provide personalized and timely and targeted feedback according to their needs? And also the emphasis, I guess, is also that it's not just about the at-risk students. When we tell academics about this system, we say it's not just about that 5, 10, 20% at the bottom of your cohort that you want to hit. This is about supporting and encouraging the learning of all your students using the information you can capture about them. And so the big question for us when we first designed the system was, how on earth do we do that? None of the enterprise systems that are out there that we had available to us could actually do this. And so we ended up building something we called the Student Relationship Engagement System. It's a bit of a mouthful, but it's called this because we wanted to keep in people's minds that it was about relationships and engagement, not about data or analytics. So I think Kevin now will share a bit about the actual running of the system, and then we'll take you guys through the actual poking around in the system.
Yeah, so thanks for joining us this afternoon now. All right, so I'll just guide you through a few components of it. So we're talking about the SRES, what it does, and the sort of the philosophy behind it and the sort of need for it, but the actual functionality of it, what it looks like. So the SRES, in some ways, is a sort of glorified online spreadsheet, sort of mashed with a mail merge, at least in the initial stages, though we've actually added a bit of functionality over the years because the project started back in 2012. So when you first log in as an instructor, what you're able to do is get all of your data in one place. Oftentimes throughout the semester and with all the sort of disparate systems we have, there are different components. So you can bring in your LMS data. If you're using a third-party tool with some rich data like Piazza or other online discussion board, you could bring in that information. If you're recording attendance in class, this is a great tool to assist you in doing that, but it also acts as a repository for that information. As well as other submissions, marks, or other online activity. So that's about sort of getting the information in. All right, so the way that we've set it up is that there's a few different ways to get information into the system. It's sort of expanded to at least 5 ways now. So one of them is to use in-class recording. So if you're in a class, you could be recording marks for presentation with a little rubric, or you could be using it to simply record attendance, of people coming in. Yeah, so there's sort of a couple examples there. A different way would just be bringing in your LMS data from Blackboard or Canvas or Moodle. So bringing an export of your grade center is the most typical. And you can just import data as a PDF as well. So any sort of file, or sorry, PDF, CSV rather. So any sort of spreadsheet type file you have, any data you've collected, or you have information from your tutors or your classes, any demographics, that whatever you wanted to bring in, you could. And then there's a sort of 5th way as well, where there's students can actually kind of supply a bit of information, but we'll get to that in a minute. All right, so what can you do with the data? So you get it in, and it's all good to have a sort of central place to have it. And so we set up a few different ways that are the main sort of means of communication with your data. So in terms of getting data out, first one's going to be email and SMS. That was the sort of the initial early stages of the project, and it's still one of the most widely used tools. So we'll talk about that more in a minute. You can also set up a customized web portal. So it basically means you can put a frame into, say, your LMS. So there's a page, if you're keeping track of, say, attendance or something, or if you're keeping, keeping track of, participation, or if a student's, met or something where they're going to want to see that information, then you can share that directly in the LMS. So you don't have to sort of trigger an email to go out. They can just go in and it's just synced with the SRES with a sort of a web page in your LMS or anywhere else you want to, you could host that. You could also get the information out at hand. So we've had some large, and sort of one of the first instances of use for it was in some large classes where I had laboratory settings. So you could see maybe when someone comes in, you could, you can check their attendance, but you could also see if they've done their pre-lab work or any sort of pre-work or that you've wanted them to do beforehand, or you could just have some of their information about their marks. So that way when you're interacting with students in class, you can make it a productive interaction rather than just sort of like, are you here? You'll have a bit of information and you'll know something extra about the student you're talking to. And you can also create some models and visualizations, which will you guys should get a chance to play with a little bit later in the session. All right, so delving into the tools, so the emails, where's the sort of power from this system? You could get your information about your students and you could just sort of send them a mass communication already with your LMS or just with a mail merge or something. But the email tool within the SRES is actually very powerful because what it allows you to do is to split apart your cohort. So you've got your whole cohort and split them into different groups. So I could say, for this particular column here, it's small to read, but is Piazza posts. So looking after one thing, after say participation in online discussion board combined with a different mark, and so you're capturing a subset of your students rather than communicating to all of them at once. So you get that filtered list of students. So it's just sort of, oh, okay, these are the people that met that condition. And then what you're able to do is create an email that's going to pull their information. So rather than just say, hello, students, if this applies to you, then you need to do this thing. If you scored this way, then that. Rather than create those conditional statements or sort of broad communications that have a lot of information that may not apply to the student reading the email, this allows targeted communication. So you're pulling out information, hello, Sarah, hello, Mohammed, hello, John, and then you can say, I noticed you scored, boom, and then you can pull out, or I've noticed you've been active, 4 posts on the discussion board, whatever it is, you can pull out their particular information and drop it in line in the email. So you can do that in sort of one set, and you could also communicate with some sort of conditional sections as well. So instead of just filtering your students into one set, you could break them apart. So say I could pull apart my sort of my high achievers, middle achievers, and my low achievers. And what I could do is send them all the same message at the beginning where I say, hello, this is about this assignment, and then the end could be my signature. But the middle section could be conditional. So my high achievers see a certain message, and then middle achievers see a different one, and the low achievers see a different one yet again, offering them different, say, resources or links to an honors program or any extra information that'd be relevant just to that set based on their actual achievement within the course. Yeah, and then you're able to just to send that out. So it's actually a really quick way. It's works really well with large numbers of students, but it's used in some smaller cohorts as well. It's just sort of a way to you can message 1,000 students and you can send them each a personalized email with just a few clicks. We're also able to track in the emails, depending on their email client setting, if they've opened it. So you can see the open rate of your emails. And then we've also got just a quick question at the end of the emails you can turn on if you like to solicit feedback. Was this information useful? Was this email useful to you? Just a little yes, no. All right, so yeah, and then that information just gets put back into the SRES. So when they open it, you can get a sort of tally, and you can see, this. I think one student in a course was, received very positive feedback that went out, and we'd seen that she'd opened the message like 13 times. All sorts of communication sort of tracked that way. The second one, moving beyond emails, is about customized web portal. So there's sort of 2 ways. The first way is a bit more static. So those same conditional rules to display information, it doesn't have to depend on you sort of picking a time to send an email if there's something you just want to be able to share all the time. So with this one, say a student hasn't viewed a resource, they haven't gone online to view something. So of the students who haven't viewed it, which you can sort of bring that information into the SRES, this page would just be instantly updated when you update that information in the SRES, and a student would see a personalized notification saying, oh, you haven't seen it. But a student who had watched the video wouldn't see this notification in the system. Oh, okay. Don't click on it directly. Okay.
Yep.
Yeah. So, and then yeah, it's built basically the same way. So this is sort of builder. You can make conditions, and you end up just building a panel which the students can see, fairly similar to the email, but just a little bit different in terms of constructing it. Yeah, and so we'll give you a chance to play with that shortly. Yeah, with various conditions. Has done this, contains certain text. There's a number of different conditional fields you can use. Okay, there we go. Into the next slide. Yeah. Yeah. So the other way that we've set it up is you can actually get information from your students. So this is a different way to sort of get information in the system. So rather than just a static page that students visit to see information that you're sharing from the database that you have about them, what you can do is set up a sort of a survey. In this case, checking on students' competency, how they felt they're doing at different milestones, different points within the course, and you can let them know that's up, and it's just always available for them, and you can host this inside your LMS. In the page, and then that information then goes back to the SRES, and you can see, and you can pull that out, you can download it and see, okay, what's what sort of feedback, which competencies are my students not feeling particularly good with, and what areas are they feeling very competent with that we don't maybe don't spend as much time on. And then I could use that information to then target students. So of those students who said that they felt very strong with communication and data analysis in this case, but their hypothesis generation not so good, I could send them targeted resources based on what they've told me about how they're doing in the course. Next way of using data is at hand. So you can enrich your interactions with your students. So when a student comes into class, you could see if they've done their pre-work, and you could also maybe have information if you've sort of pre-assigned some material for them. So if you split up some topics for different group work, you could set that up beforehand, and then you've got a record of where they are, or if you're distributing lab samples, you could be keeping track of that as well when you interact with them. And then you can also collect data, in this case, attendance coming into the system for your student, and then it's recorded there. The pictures are a bit optional. We have, at least at our institution, we have a little bit of difficulty getting that from our student information service. So it's a possibility within the system, but you'd have to take the photos yourself, at least in our setup. That might be different at your university. Yeah, and that's just showing the information kind of back and forth, displaying information in and out. Okay, next one, into the visualizations, different sort of way of interacting with the data that you've got in your class. So, I mean, I look at the spreadsheet and I can't quite tell what the spread is. If you've got a large number of students, it's good to be able to dump it into some graphs and spreadsheets. And the great thing with these two is you can actually construct emails from them. So rather than sort of have to think about, okay, I want to send to students who scored less than this amount or who had more than this amount on this last quiz. In this case, what you could do is actually select from the graph, and you could build email rules from them, as well as just getting a good overlay of the information that's available. We also have it's a bit more complicated, a bit more maybe towards the end of the semester when you have a bit more information. It's depending on the power. This is some machine learning, so it's able to do some analytics to sort of develop some trees. It's a bit of an experimental feature we have in there, but it's worth mentioning just because it can give you some great feedback of when the sort of important forks are within the course. So if a student failed this particular assessment or scored sort of moderately at this particular time in the semester, most of those students tended towards sort of cluster analysis with machine learning to kind of figure out which sort of behavioral patterns based on combinations of whatever information you have, attendance or marks and things like that, would result in different outcomes.
Yeah, so the idea, I guess, is that the whole system really encourages academics to really think about their course and think about what kind of information is important. And so, like Kevin was talking about in the previous slide, those analytics and those dashboards, essentially, we don't. What the SRES does is provides them a blank canvas in order to build those things. It doesn't force any dashboards or any visualizations on anyone. It says, this is your data. We will help you work with it. What would you like to see, basically? And so the idea is academics have the best idea about what's going on in their course, how students are engaging, and what data points, we'll talk to them about this, and they can do with it what they want. This next slide here is kind of talking about how different academics use, because of the flexibility of the SRES, they use it in different ways to personalize student support. And so we've got all the way from the remedial saying, it doesn't look like you're struggling a bit too much. And so maybe you should consider withdrawing before census dates, all the way through to the, I love what you do in the class. You've done this X, Y, Z, and this is fantastic. Come and work with me and be my student, kind of thing. And so there's a whole bunch of different things that you can do with it. And what other people are using the SRES for is, for example, so in chemistry they have WHS requirements, but also they have very complex laboratory setup. And so what they do is they get students as they come in, the academic will scan them in using their student card or another barcode, and the academic will have a chat with them saying, you're in group X today in this lab. I noticed you got 4 out of 10 for your pre-work quiz. What's going on? And so the idea is data all together into one place, so that students can feel more, I guess your interaction with students can be more informed. This other example is a nice rubric that people have developed from pharmacy, and this is for an OSCE. If you don't know what an OSCE is, it's an objective structured clinical examination. And this is where normally you would maybe take a piece of paper or something around clinic or lab or something and mark people off. But in this case, you've designed a rubric that sits inside the SRES. A tutor or an assessor will access this web mobile-friendly interface and then just push a few buttons, type a bit of text, and then save this, and it'll be saved to the central database, and you can do whatever you want there. Another example of one of those web portals that Kevin talked about before, where we can present feedback and grades and these kind of things to students. So everything in that blue box there would be sitting embedded inside an LMS, for example, or sitting inside a link that the students would click through from an email. And you can just imagine that if that was sitting in an LMS, and you were looking at it as a student in Blackboard, for example, in My Grades, that would be a list of 40 different things, but now it's actually properly formatted as part of that nice table. And also, we've been working with the library here at Sydney, at least, bringing in things like Turnitin data. So Turnitin, in GradeMark, how you can drag in those blue comments. And so for academic integrity, we have specific comments that the markers can drag in. So for example, citation needed here or incorrect citation. And then we pull that data out of Turnitin. And then based on that, we say, well, if a student has been marked or has been commented, given the feedback of incorrect citation more than twice, and then received missing citation more than 3 times, then they'll get particular bits of information sent through in their email. And so it's a nice way to kind of give that kind of feedback in students' faces. So I guess the whole story of the SRES is kind of summarized by this. It's kind of built by teachers originally because we had that real need to support our students at scale. We had 1,000, 2,000 students in first year science classes, and we really wanted to care for them, but we weren't able to care for them at scale. And so we wanted the computer to help us do this quickly. And so over the years, Kevin was saying, we've been working with other teachers who have been using the system, and the idea is that as they've gotten onto the system, they've said, hey, maybe this might be useful, how about this kind of stuff, and we've kind of built it with them and also for them as well. So I think that's kind of us talking. Maybe we could do a bit of hands-on, and then we'll come back together after a little bit of hands-on, and Alan, should we cover a few of the questions first in the chat?
I think there are a couple of questions here. Maybe perhaps you address those questions before we move on to the hands-on activity.
Awesome. Okay.
I just repeat.
Okay, so let's go.
Perhaps
down.
what we can do is we can address some of these questions.
So Glenn, machine learning algorithms, how you backdated your data. Yeah, so there's interesting questions coming through chat about the data and link ups with the LMS. And as we'll show you with the hands-on, and as we kind of tried to allude to during the chat so far, we're finding that academics don't actually want so much of that data from data warehouses. What they actually want is information about how their students are engaging, not how they have engaged in the past 18 years of their life, but how they're actually engaging in the course right then during the semester while it's happening. And so in terms of the predictive analytics, we typically find people don't use things like ATAR and you know, socioeconomic background and school they went to and those kind of things, but rather that they use, you know, last year, were they coming to class? You know, how did they go in test 1 and 2? How did they go in these online sheets and stuff? And so it's kind of a different kind of data that teachers are wanting, as opposed to data that's actually in the data warehouse. So that's kind of a non-answer to your question. Wiggly tree diagrams. Yeah, so due to this question about wiggly tree diagrams, we didn't show you today, but there's also another kind of a way to visualize the data, and that's through cluster analysis. And I think the point of all these kind of machine analyses techniques is not to be a be-all and end-all for the teachers. When we tell teachers about it, we say, you know, this is a conversation starter. The machine will take in data that you've told it that you think are probably important, and the machine will try and find some hidden patterns that you may not be able to find or see as a human being looking through tons and tons of data. And what the machine will tell you is not the answer. It will raise some questions to actually start thinking about your learning design and things like that with. Privacy and ethical issues when pooling the data. Pooling the so I'm not sure what you mean, just Logan from Latrobe, when you say pooling the data. So maybe you mean like the dashboards or the visualizations. It's from the teacher side of things. This is all data that the teachers already have access to, just that normally the data would either be sitting on spreadsheets in 3 different folders on their computer, and maybe 3 pieces of paper in their bag or in their tutor's bag, for example. And so it's just a way to kind of get, or like Kevin was saying, you already have access to this data, and so it's just kind of bringing it together in a way that you can actually access more easily. So that's a good answer. Sorry, Kevin, didn't see that one. Okay, so Alan, should we move on to the hands-on? Okay, cool. Alan's typing. Okay, so you may need to, depending on your computer, you may need to Alt-Tab or something out of this. We've got a few scenarios here, I guess. And so imagine you're a tutor in a very large class, a class of 1,000. You're a tutor and you're taking 40 students, for example. So we want you to log in to this site here. Everyone's using the same login, so everyone's kind of being the same tutor. But if you could log into this and just give assign participation marks for your group. What we'll do is we'll watch the database as people are putting in information. If you're having any issues, then just do bring it out via the chat. Oh, I've been disconnected. Very strange. Okay, so the idea behind this particular demo is that hopefully you'll see on the screen, imagine you're a tutor logging into the system and you have to grade participation marks or something during the semester. You would choose which group you're part of, or you're teaching, then you would show, and then you would punch in a bit of data. And so normally what would happen is this would be happening in, yep, let's switch. This would normally be happening on pieces of paper, or just not happening at all. But in this way, because with the SRES, you're able to design these interfaces. Just click on name, doesn't matter. I'll click show. There's these interfaces where tutors are able to access the server. At the same time, you're able to access the server, and then everyone can kind of enter data about students. And it's just a very quick way to enter or to get on board with the information. So you can imagine, you can collect 13 weeks worth of this data, or even 4 weeks worth of this data, and then very quickly intervene for students who are doing well, doing poorly, or doing in the middle range, and also kind of be able to keep an eye on your students. Okay. All right, so I think people have been playing with that. Maybe we could hop on to the next the next things. We might alt tab back to the presentation itself. Okay, so we've just been in class. We've assigned participation marks to people, and the next thing is next week they're all giving their presentations. Let's change the URL. Go to this new one. Those are the names of the people in your class. Give them some marks and give them some feedback using the system. So again, the idea is that screen that you should see. So we're just gonna, maybe we'll stick with the URL. Some people maybe, oh, you've got it on the.
Yeah, I pasted the URL in the
okay,
chat.
Cool.
And so these pages that you're seeing currently are mobile friendly, and so if you're using a phone, feel free to use a phone to log in, and you should be able to see all these things. And so all the buttons you're seeing on the screen and all the boxes and stuff and all the names, all that is customizable by the teacher. And so if they want a rubric of 2 rows and 5 comment boxes, or 1 comment box and pass or fail or whatever, they can design this fairly easily in the system itself. And the idea is, once the academic or the teacher or the designer designs these data entry interfaces, tutors can very easily just hop on and use the data entry interfaces to collect data which would otherwise not be collected.
And this also works really well with mobile, so it's quite well integrated. You can open it on your iPad or on your phone. Yeah, so it quite well integrates with Android and with iOS with Apple.
Okay, so I'm just going to look at how the data is coming in. Okay, good. So people are saving data into the thing, which is great. All right, cool. So imagine that you've set these interfaces up for your tutors to be able to tell you stuff about the students, either little comments or feedback or presentation, participation marks, or whether or not they've come to class and these kind of things. And next, what you need to think about is, I guess, as a teacher, what you would do with all this information. So again, this information is information that would otherwise not be able to be collected, typically by systems. You can obviously bring into the SRES other things like LMS data, or if you have you just have a spreadsheet yourself, you can bring that information in as well. But this is additional information that is about engagement and student success, which is typically not data-based, or which is not typically available. And so if we think kind of from the tutor lens now to the teacher lens, and think about, now you're a teacher, okay, so we want you to log out. If you're in the system currently, we want you to log out as that tutor, and then we'll give you a new login, which is for the tutor, for the teacher, the coordinator. And then you'll be able to see a whole bunch of different things and be able to manipulate the data in different ways as well. Okay, so once you're logged out of the system, this is your next little play task, I guess. So imagine you're a unit coordinator, you've just reached week 5, and you've got a bunch of participation data and also maybe some marks data from that presentation that your students have just gone and done. We want you to pop into the SRES again, but this time from the kind of the coordinator or the teacher interface. So the username is admin01 and the password is testadmin01.
So throw it in the chat. So if we switch to
Cool. Okay, so right. Okay, so I guess the idea here is once you're in the system, actually we might show you this actually, we might just flick through to the system itself. So Kevin's got the URL in the chat box, so it's just app.sres.io, just a test public site, and you're logged in as the teacher. And so what you should be able to see if you click on that first drop down is you should be able to see the available lists. And so for us it's just that demo 1001, And if we wanted to view all the data that's been saved, we would come here and view the full list. And this would be all the information that the SRES currently knows about the particular students. And what you see is in the first two columns, participation mark and presentation marking, that's where all the data that you've just been saving as a pretend tutor has actually gone in, and you can actually view that data as is. But you can also do some bulk actions with the information as well. Just while we're here in this screen, just to scroll across. The other kinds of information you can bring in, all these other columns, for example, a lot of these other columns are imported from either the LMS or other CSVs that you may have on hand, or maybe they're from other kind of mobile interfaces your tutors may need. You also see this column here, the report average. This is what we call an aggregator column. It's essentially like an Excel formula, and so you can do things like average or count the number of empties or count the number of non-empties and stuff. And so here in this early attendance count, this is aggregating or counting up how many sessions have actually been marked for attendance. So anything that is full will count as a one there. Okay, so if we go back to the home page, what we might do is we might make one of these emails that Kevin was talking about before. And the way that this works is that everyone should come down here and just click create a new filter. And a filter is tied to a message or an email in that first you have your entire cohort of 1,000 or 40 or whatever students, and then you build a filter with some rules to filter those 1,000 students down to 800 based on some rules. And then what you do is you compose a particular message to these students. Okay, so we'll do test filter, for example. And over here, this is where the rules are set. And so we have conditions here. And so we could set, for example, maybe if the early attendance count is less than, I don't know, less than 3, it's a number, then they'll get a particular email, for example. So using this system, you can actually insert other people's email addresses here. So if you're the coordinator, you had a team of tutors, you could get the SRES to send the email from the tutors, or look like it's sending the email from the tutor's email account. So when they hit reply, they can actually reply to the tutor as opposed to everyone replying to you. Down here in the subject, and the idea is that you try and personalize the information as much as you can. And so here, what you can do is you can insert a data field, and this data field will pull information from the SRES database itself. And so we can do, for example, student details, and we can pull in their preferred name, and then use this. And when the actual mail merge goes through, that'll be replaced with the student's actual preferred name. And so here again, as part of the message, like Kevin was explaining before, you can actually pull in information from the SRES itself. So let's just pull in information from the actual course, and the data that we'll pull in is how many classes they've been to. Okay, so from Demo 1001, the early attendance count column, and we use this to type a message to the student. I really hope this works. And all the way down here, what you see is you can add other sections. And so if you add a section, this is essentially just you can say, okay, so this email will be sent to all the students who have less than 3 in the early attendance count. Let's make that less than or equals to 3. And if you have particular students within this sub-cohort who you're worried about, then you could say maybe also if you haven't engaged with the videos, for example, okay, then you can say also video that we posted. And then have that. And then you have your signature here, and then come down here. You can attach files to people. Kevin was talking about before how every email is tracked, and so we have a little hidden beacon in each email. So when the recipient opens the email, as long as they don't have super tight security settings, the SRES is able to see who's opened the email and when. And also down here, there's a little request feedback thing, which we'll hopefully see in the next screen as well. Okay, so here we go. So everyone. These are the 40 students who the filter has picked up. And so, hi Warren, you've been to 3 classes so far. Hi, you've been to 2 classes so far. And this particular student has not watched the video, and so they've actually received this other section here. Whereas Warren did watch the video, and so they're not receiving that message there at all. And then once you press send, don't press send, but if you do have your real students and you do press send, it will just confirm you really want to do that. And then it'll shoot off all these personalized emails to your students from the email address you selected. Kevin was saying before also how the feedback loop, so at the bottom, what we're doing with these emails is we've got data about the students' engagement and success data. We've sent them some feedback using the system. We want to then get feedback on the feedback. And so the SRES has this ability to actually ask the students, was this message helpful? If they click yes or no, that rating is saved into the system. And then they're also presented with a little box that says, great, we're glad it was helpful, or we're sorry it wasn't helpful, why or why not, essentially. And so that gets fed back to you as a teacher to kind of fix up your feedback loop a little bit. Okay, so that's kind of the basic filtering of the system, where you can, you've got data, you can build a few rules, and then you can decide on the message that you want to send to the students. So really it's about helping teachers to be faster and more efficient at this reaching out and engaging with their students. If you're feeling adventurous, I think the other slide that we have here is creating our own dashboard. And so maybe we might just do this very quickly. The system will stay open. This is a public site with demonstration data, and so even after the webinar today, you can just feel free to poke around. Hopefully you won't break it. If you do, then we've got system images that we can put things back in place again. But if you do break it, let us know, and we'll fix it right up. But yeah, so the thing that Kevin was talking about before as well, the idea of making your own graphs. So again, back on the home screen here, if we choose the class that we're interested in, and then we want to visualize the data from this class, what we can do is we can say, okay, well, let's see how people have been marked in their content and also in their presentation. And also let's look at the overall grade for presentation marking. Let's draw a pie chart for that. Okay, I want to now send a message to all the students who have received a high distinction or a distinction. Oh, there's only 3 students, that's all right. And so what I'll do is I'll click those segments on the pie. I'll come down here and build the filter, and then I'll view the filter and type my message. And it's a quick way to kind of engage with the data, to see the data first of all, and then to engage with the data to actually do something for your students. Yeah, basically. So feel free to keep having a play, but what we might do is we might come back to the PowerPoint and just do a bit of a wrap up before a bit of opening again to questions. So Hazel's got a challenge of breaking the system, fantastic. So I guess over the years, we started our initial pilot at Sydney in 2012 in just one school in 4 different units, and since then it's kind of grown over time. Now it's reaching about 120 different units of study at Sydney University. And as we kind of started off, we really, the system, because it was built by teachers for teachers with teachers, we wanted to kind of just, in the initial stage of it, was just make teachers' lives easier about data. And so it's just about getting data into the system, and then we were able to build after that the filters and messaging and get more data in, like LMS or spreadsheet data. Then we built in Predictive Analytics, improve the UI, build web portals, and build data visualization. So it's interesting because most people, when they're doing analytics at university, they start on that top right. They start with visualization. They start with a dashboard. But we were like, well, teachers don't really need that. We think teachers want stuff that can help them to communicate and work with their students at scale, help them to care about the students, and work with data that they think is important. So that's what we started on the bottom left instead. So this is a usual kind of story that we see. This is from pharmacy, and they've been really good because they've taken up the system especially well, and the idea is that it's become kind of business as usual for them. They're saying coordinators are usually a bit hesitant at saying, oh, what's this new thing? But they move very quickly to actually endorsing it and sharing the news. And I think that kind of word of mouth sharing, people saying, hey, this is actually quite useful, people sharing it out like that has been the reason why the system has grown so much so quickly. And it's interesting that that bottom comment, now staff are increasingly wanting to use analytics. And so the idea is, because the system is usable and useful for them, and because, we've built these champions up within the faculties, they're actually now thinking, well, this is data about my students. Maybe I can do some stuff with it. Maybe I can actually use it to communicate with them at scale. Maybe I can do some analytics on it. And so this is what we term analytics by stealth. For our teachers, a lot of the time, the data that they want, like we've been saying, is not really the LMS or demographic data. It's this engagement success data. And so attendance, for example, is a really big thing for academics. They always say, we want to know who's coming to class, and fair enough. And so what we say is, yep, the SRES can help you do this in lots of different ways. Once you get the data in, hey, how about this? Hey, how about this analysis you can do? How about this other data you can bring in? And so we kind of Trojan horse analytics by giving them something that they need and then saying, hey, but how about? And so it's kind of that analytics by Trojan horse. So I also like these quotes from some recent reports and papers, which is talking about how analytics projects tend to be more successful if you kind of start small, kind of like what we did, and then kind of promote this scalability and mainstream adoption. And that last one is kind of nice because it's talking about how when you actually maybe try and scale up, the different ways of scaling up, either going through institutional IT or going through some other solution, but some ways of scaling up may mean that the product becomes not nimble enough to deal with idiosyncrasies. And I think learning and teaching is all about idiosyncrasies. I think our academics on all corners of the university, they have very different ways of working with things. So what the SRES tries to do is it tries to address or allow people to teach the way that they want to teach and get data in that they want to get in. And so what we've seen is we've started at Sydney University. There's pilots running at UNSW and also at Melbourne. And we have a software developer at Melbourne working with us quite closely to keep building up the system as well. We're doing installations for Curtin and Monash. And also we have JCU and Griffith interested as well. And so I guess the idea of this slide is we're happy to share it with other universities or other institutions freely. The way that it normally happens is we will work with your IT people to set up a server so that the data lives on your own systems. We're not for any money. We're in it for or any kind of name or anything. We're just in it because we love teaching and we want to support students. We want to help people who teach support students better as well. And so that's kind of our philosophy approaching this. And so we're very happy to talk with more people. And this is the kind of the broader team. So we've got people from Sydney, from Melbourne, and also from UNSW helping us along with this. So I think anything else you guys would like to add about it? So I think, what's Alan saying? I can't hear Alan. So Alan, we're done talking. So over to you.
Thanks very much, Danny and Kevin and Rose. Yeah, I think this is really great because we are able to have a sense of the system by the hands-on activity, those questions that has been posed. So I just want to open up, for the last maybe 6 minutes of the time to the team, the participants here. Are there any burning questions that you would like to ask the presenters? Okay, while waiting for the rest, I just want to find out if there are any universities outside Australia who are keen to explore this particular system. Would there be any opportunities for that as well?
So we haven't had any people approach us, but we're very happy to work with people outside. The system can be fairly readily installed on any old server. Indeed, it was running under someone's desk for a little while at one stage before being moved to a centrally supported server. So we're happy to do installs and work with you guys for that as well. There is AAF authentication, Australian Access Federation, and so if you are an AAF subscribed institution, then getting authentication set up is very, very easy.
Okay, great. Logan has a question there.
Yeah, so student reaction expectations. We get that question a lot, and it's really interesting because our students typically don't know, because it's coming. They're used to receiving. We're all used to receiving these personalized emails from Amazon and Google, that kind of stuff, which says hi, your first name. But when it actually comes from their teacher, they don't think that it's actually coming from a computer, and so it's quite nice that the students do just reply saying, "Oh, thanks for contacting me." You know, they actually think that it's you who's sending out all these emails. And in a way, it is you, because you're the one who has to drive the system. We don't want any automation. We don't do set and forget with the system. That's a philosophical decision that we've made, because we want teachers to be actively engaged in communicating and engaging their students, and so we want. We have that kind of human factor as quite central into it, and students don't really see the computer behind it, and if they do see it, so some coordinators, they actually in the first line of the email they say, "I am using an automated system to blah blah blah," and the students are fine with that too. So I think it just works either way.
Okay, that's great. Any other questions before we wrap up? Okay, one more from Logan.
Curriculum design. So that's an interesting question, because it's the whole idea of how can we design our curriculum so that analytics just generally can be more useful. So how can we design our LMS sites, for example, so that we can pick up some more data? How do we design assessments so that we can pick up early engagement and success data from our students? So I think there is a strong relationship there with the idea of you have a lot more touch points, or a lot of different touch points in your semester, especially early on, so that you can actually leverage those touch points to absorb or be able to pick up some data. Yeah, it is.
Yeah, I think it actually, I mean, one way that would be good to incorporate is a more formalized, formative assessments. So, you know, because if you have, you know, 1,000 students or 500 students, the idea of providing feedback on that level can be difficult. But with the SRES, it's actually really easy to send out communications based on performance bands, and you can actually give them useful feedback. So, you know, so I think it can offer a little bit of a supporting tool to make it a bit easier to run some of those early formative assessments, so students can get a bit more steering earlier in the course and get some valid feedback.
And I guess the work with Turnitin with the grade mark is something that you could sort of expand and design your Turnitin assignment so that you can get the correct data in so that students get their feedback that's more meaningful and perhaps a bit more global.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that targeted feedback is really important, and like Alan was saying as well in the chat, it also relates to their learning outcomes as well. So if we're able to pick up some data around whether or not they've achieved particular learning outcomes, then we can actually really hit the feedback on those too. And also what Hay was saying about analytics informing design, definitely as well. We're seeing that with the machine learning a bit, in that academics are sucking in data into the system and then throwing that at machine learning, and the machine saying, well, it looks like participation and attendance aren't actually that important, but what's important is X, Y, and Z. And so that's kind of helping them to say, oh, actually, maybe the design isn't working in the way I intended it to. So just Logan's question about academic responses. Yeah, so we get questions about workload. You know, like if I send out 800 emails to my students, am I going to get 800 emails back? And typically, yes and no. It depends on how friendly the academic sounds in their email. They do tend to respond to the email by just hitting reply, especially the panicking students. But what we try and The value add we try to explain to people is that the system will help you use your time differently and hopefully better, because it saves you all this admin work of collecting spreadsheets and doing all those VLOOKUPs in Excel and that kind of stuff. Your time, instead of wasting it on admin, you can actually waste it or use it on working with students. And so that's kind of the how we try to sell it. Andrew's the version on display today on GitHub. So the model we're operating under is a kind of a closed open source model. So with partner institutions, we're happy to share the source codes that you can work with it, but it's not fully open. And so it's not on GitHub, it's actually on Bitbucket.
Okay, we have perhaps a last question from Hazel.
Yeah, so the whole nanny state kind of idea, you know, will students get too reliant on this? Very interesting question. Very interesting question. I think it might. It'd be interesting to know. Hazel, it's a good question. Don't be sorry about it. Good to open it to the floor actually to see what people think about it. I think on one part it kind of depends on how the academics are actually using or what kind of information they're providing in the nudges and helping students not to be too reliant on them.
I think it depends too on the type of feedback that you're sending through. So, you know, if you are sending things like reminders, then, you know, students can come to rely on that if the information you send are reminders. But if the information is more about feedback or more about connections to, you know, resources based on achievement bands, or you know, things like that, then you know, then it's not necessarily going to become a reliance. And you know, in other ways, maybe some of those students do need a little bit more help. Say a student who's not attending class, that reminder might actually help them. But I'm not sure if it would necessarily create a dependency. It would just be sort of you know, scooping up some of the students who might have been overlooked before.
Yeah, so I like Judith and Logan's comments. Yeah. So we shouldn't stop doing this, but the way that we do it and the context in which we do it is definitely important. I think people use it a lot in first year because of that transition or helping students transition. And as you get on in the years, students should hopefully need less of this kind of reminder and transition support, but they'll need other forms of feedback. And so context definitely important there.
And I think it also has that power of, instead of doing sort of nagging in the lecture theatre, you know, to your students as a group, which maybe many of them tune out of, maybe not nagging, but nudging, reminding, gentle pushing, it's more powerful because it is going to a person individually. So I think that alters the feeling somewhat.
Yeah, definitely.
Doesn't it?
Yeah.
Okay, I think we will officially end the session here, and please feel free to continue the chat over the next couple of minutes. But on behalf of ASCILITE, we would like to thank Danny, Kevin, and Ruth for sharing with us about this particular system that has been, you know, developed and implemented at the universities and various universities in Australia. It has been very helpful, very informative, and we just really appreciate your time and effort in sharing with us. So once again, thank you. And for the rest of the participants, we really hope that you have found the session useful, and we will keep you informed of the webinar schedule in the coming weeks and months. So once again, thanks, and bye for now.